Unfortunately, Bitcoiners, your hardware wallet is just not enough anymore. Your hardware wallet, no matter if it's air gapped with your own Bitcoin node and you got the secret 25th password, all that good stuff, right? Unfortunately, that's no longer enough to protect your Bitcoin. Let me explain. Bitcoin, as you know, is one of the most powerful assets on the planet, but it is also one of the most vulnerable because it is so powerful. At this point, Bitcoin represents a six-figure asset. And when I say six-figure, I mean like individual coin. Obviously, it's $1 trillion+ couple $1 trillion+ plus market, and will continue to grow. What that means is people see it as more valuable. Obviously, they will start to attack it in whatever way they can. And if they know that you have a strong defense, which that is typically what most Bitcoiners lean towards, having a strong defense from a technical standpoint, why would someone attack it from there, right? Even if it's an unintentional attack, I still think that is the least likely area of attack, because even right now, like, you're 10 times more likely to lose your keys or lose access to your wallet or your Bitcoin than you are to lose it to some type of hack, right? You don't have a huge threat of hacks if you even have like halfway decent security. Now, some folks go above and beyond in order to maintain privacy and all that good stuff, but it's very easy to keep Bitcoin safe, to be completely honest, from a technical standpoint. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to help you fill a blind spot that I see most Bitcoiners have and not enough people are talking about. And the way that we're going to fill that blind spot is through a trust. I spoke about trust briefly in another video where I broke down our KEEP framework, which is designed to keep Bitcoin safe for today, as well as, several generations in the future. But I couldn't go into the trust too much because it deserved its own video. And that's what this video is about. So I'm going to give you ultimately the 4 different provisions that you need to have inside of your trust as a bare minimum in order to make sure that you protect your Bitcoin from the 4 major threats. And those 4 major threats are external threats, internal threats, technical threats, and non-technical threats. Okay. So yeah, most people, and it's natural to see that, and it's natural to understand it because Bitcoin is naturally a digital asset. So it's very technical. So naturally, we want to protect it from the technical threats. But at this point, we've solved that problem. We have solved the technical protection Bitcoin problem. And I think we did a pretty good job. But what's happening is now, you have this asset that is on a global scale and recognized by courts, recognized by, both good and bad people. And that means the area, your attack area just got so much wider, because what happens when a judge orders you to liquidate some of your holdings in order to settle some type of lawsuit? Or what happens when, you get hit with some type of, tax burden that you didn't prepare for, or you're getting overtaxed because you weren't structured properly? So a properly structured trust, is going to protect you from all of those things. And I'm not speaking from what I think I know, I'm speaking from experience. I have 10,000 plus hours of studying, structuring, and educating on Bitcoin. I've been in since the end of 2015, top of 2016. And I've also had the benefit of seeing it from different angles. As a tax advisor for the last couple of years, I see it from different angles that most traditional Bitcoiners aren't typically exposed to. So the information I'm giving you is very powerful, very potent. It is not to be taken lightly. So if you are serious about sovereignty and you are serious about legacy, this video is for you. If you're one of those people who think that, or who simply believe that, you can own an ETF and get the same perks and get the same perks and the same sovereignty from Bitcoin, or you don't even see Bitcoin as some sovereign thing, this video is probably not for you, and the exit is that way. All right. Now that we have the real Bitcoiners, the people who care about sovereignty and legacy, leaving an inheritance for their children's children, let's talk about, let's talk about what we can do to fix this blind spot. But before I get into this blind spot, I want to give this story to you because I think it's super powerful visual and super powerful story that compares to what Bitcoiners are actually experiencing right now. So back in the 1930s, the French and Germany, during World War II, Germany invaded France. But before Germany invaded France and completely just mollywopped them, put the grease on the belt, mollywopped them. Before they did that, the French built this big ass wall, right? And this big wall was called the Maginot Line. And, Obviously, the minister of defense back then, his last name, I don't remember his first name, but his last name was Maginot. I might be saying that wrong, but I'm not French, so excuse me. But they built this wall facing Germany, and they spent billions of dollars on it, and Germany knew about it. So when it was time to attack, Germany didn't touch the wall. To this day, the wall was never touched. So Germany went around, attacked through a weak spot, and attacked with so much power and so much force. It took them about a week or so to pretty much clean the French up. So if it wasn't for America, today, the French would actually be speaking German. That's how bad it was. And I tell that story because exactly what Bitcoiners are doing today, where they have this huge defensive wall. They got the hardware wallets. They got the secret 25th password. They got the air gap computers. They got the latest cold stores. They got, their private keys stored in Norway, some type of safe or vault in Norway. You got some people who even, built some stuff out of Antarctica, right? And that's fine. But again, what happens when the threat comes from inside? What happens when the threat looks like an incompetent heir? What happens when the threat looks like a failed business partnership? What happens when the threat comes from your government? If you pay attention right now in the EU, they just said that, hey, you guys got some real nice chunky savings. You guys aren't really using them. You know what? Country's in pretty bad shape. I think we're going to use them. But don't worry, we're going to replace it, right? Yeah. So in addition to that, that's just the most recent example. Back in 1930, if you guys remember, 1930, April 5th, Executive Order 6102, do your research, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, which made it illegal to hoard gold. People were trying to build wealth and they call it hoarding gold. So they made everyone go and sell their gold for $20 an ounce. We all know who got the bad end of that stick, right? We have to protect our sovereignty from both internal and external threats. And unfortunately, we have to protect it against all four threats, actually: internal, external, technical, and non-technical. So in order to do that, hardware wallets and just technical things just aren't enough, because as you see, we have three other aspects that are left completely wide open. But fortunately for us, we have proof that these things work, and they work really well. These are some of the same instruments that the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Mellons, Walt Disney, all of these families that we still know of today that were able to maintain generational wealth past the 3-generation mark, which is typically where most generational wealth, is depleted. They've been able to pass that milestone because of how they structured their wealth. As a tax advisor, I always tell my clients that there's two ways to really reduce your taxes and just completely obliterate them. It's buy assets, borrow against the assets, and then die. And also structure. If you have the right structure, you can defer taxes, avoid taxes, all type of good stuff if you have the right structure. And those families leverage trust in some of the most powerful ways possible. And it was what was able to preserve their wealth for years on end. So we bring that same framework into the new digital asset space. So for me personally, I use a modified dynasty trust. We call it the untethered dynasty trust, where the base model is built on that same dynasty trust that those families use, but it is modernized to compensate for the emergence of digital assets. Because for me, Bitcoin is our core asset. And it's also modernized to accommodate for any type of economic uncertainty. So if we need to change jurisdictions or anything like that, it's already baked into the trust that the trustee can pretty much maneuver in the best benefit of the trust for the trust assets. Because the way that the trust is designed, at least, our trust is designed to take care of the beneficiaries. In fact, I have it set up to whereas once Bitcoin enters that trust, you can never sell Bitcoin. You can borrow against it. You can borrow from the trust. You can use the Bitcoin to, go acquire some cash flowing assets, but you cannot sell Bitcoin. This is going to be in my family for the next few hundred years, like guaranteed. As long as, even if it goes to $20, my trust is going to buy more Bitcoin. Like, that's how serious this thing is. But the beautiful part about it is, although I'm talking about digital assets, although I'm talking about Bitcoin specifically, again, it's built on the foundation that has protected real estate, gold, art, and other types of assets for hundreds of years at this point. Again, this isn't some new thing. We're just modifying it to accommodate for the emergence of this new super asset called Bitcoin. And yes, Bitcoin is a super asset. I'll tell you about what a super asset is on another video. Again, I want to keep this very specific. Now, so let's get into what those 4 key components are, or 4 key provisions that you need to go and tell your tax advisor, your accountant, or your attorney that you want, as you need to have these inside of your trust if you're going to use that trust as a protection hedge or a shield, again, to protect from all 4 of those different threats. Again, external, internal, technical, and non-technical. So the first thing, we want to make sure that this trust is a non-grantor, irrevocable, and spendthrift trust. What does that mean, Fitz? That means non-grantor, meaning that the person who initiates this trust, as soon as it's set up, they sign some documents and they are no longer in the picture, right? So they have nothing to do with it. Irrevocable means that once it is set in place, it's pretty much stamped. Very difficult to reverse an irrevocable trust. Third, spendthrift, super powerful, very powerful provision, means that, or you're setting this in place, not even what it means, but the reason why you're having it is because it protects your assets from any stupidity that you or your beneficiaries, your heirs, might get into. The assets within that trust cannot be held liable for what they do. This has been upheld in Supreme Court multiple times. So it's very important that you have at least that foundation for your trust. Again, it's like building a house where we can't build the framework and the walls and all that stuff until we have a solid foundation first. All right, that's the first provision that we need to have. Make sure that we have the base model, super robust protection. Second thing, we need to, again, make sure that we have very specific provisions for digital assets themselves. So what kind of digital assets can we hold? What quantity or what amount of that digital asset is in cold storage versus in a hot wallet that the trustee has access to? What is the risk management framework for that? What are the qualifications for the trustee? What kind of training does he have to undergo? How often does he have to undergo some training or certification or whatever the case is? Also, what governs his decision making? How do we make sure that he's making the right decision? And I'll get into that. Now I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I apologize. But yeah, we want to make sure that we have a really robust framework for digital assets specifically, because they're new and a lot of attorneys, tax advisors, accountants, they aren't super familiar with it. So you got to put some time and energy into that part to make sure that it's protected. The third thing, which I kind of hinted at already, is a modern governance framework. Modern governance meaning that in what I believe to be the best form, again, I can only speak on, what we're using, is a combination of human governance and technology governance. So smart contracts, governing certain decisions, making sure that timeframes are being kept as far as like annual penetration tests, annual checkups, things like that, or certain quarterly reports so that we know what's going on with the trust. And if those things aren't done, that system will trigger and send an alert to the trust protector, who is also a part of this modern governance framework. But essentially, the easiest way to think about it is they kind of counteract each other. They balance each other out. It's just like a checks and balance system. The humans make sure that the technology doesn't get out of hand, and the technology makes sure that the humans don't get out of hand. And then you have multiple humans in that governance framework as well that are checking each other as well. So although the trustee has a lot of power, for example, I'm the trustee of my trust, the trust protector, in my example, or in my case, my brother is my trust protector because he loves my family like I love my family, and I love his like he loves his. So I designated him as my trust protector. So if he sees me, incapacitated or, I'm breaking the rules of my trust, he can come in and exercise his powers and say, hey, hold on, buddy, you're violating the rules, or something happens and he has to replace me because something happened to me. He has the power to do that. It's, again, a good modern governance system. And for those of you who have a lot of assets inside of that trust, you do well to add a digital asset committee as well. And that digital asset committee is designed to help the trustee make some wise decisions. So it's designed to serve as wise counsel as it relates to making decisions about any of the assets in the trust, specifically digital assets. Now, those people don't necessarily need to have access to any keys or anything, but you can bake them into the trust to make sure that, again, you're built to last. And that is super important because there's a representation of economic energy. And economic energy is composed of human life force. That is how economic energy is derived. When we go and deliver goods and services, we are giving a very limited life source, and then we capture that life force in money. So if we're wise, we don't want to waste our life. We want to capture it, put it in something that can be stored for a long time, which is why so many wealthy people are leaning towards Bitcoin, because it's one of the only things that they can mathematically prove will be here for the next few hundred years and be able to actually, stand the test of time, of durability, be flexible, seamlessly cross borders. Elon's talking about going to Mars. So anyway, I don't want to get too far into that, but long story short, obviously that stuff means a lot to certain people like myself. So that is why, it's important to have these robust governance models that are built to last, because we are building to change the trajectory of our families. If you're like me, you come from nothing. You come from literally nothing. You were never told about asset protection. You were never taught on how to build wealth. So the things that we're putting in place now are designed to change the trajectory of our lineage into the foreseeable future, right? And the unforeseeable future, if we do it the right way. So the final piece of that, the final provision that you want to make sure that you have inside of your trust is flexibility. You want to make sure that you have a flexible framework that accommodates or accounts for any evolution of technology. We got a lot of AI stuff, emerging. We have different technology being attached to the digital assets and things like that. And we just want to be prepared for that. We want to be flexible. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves. In addition to that flexibility with just our risk management and our risk framework, we also want to make sure that we have flexibility in jurisdiction, for economic uncertainty. If something happens in an economic place, like I said, in the EU, they're using their, citizens, savings accounts. What if you wanted to move your assets and you needed to do it quickly? That trust would need to specify, how your jurisdiction is to be changed in a situation that, the environment becomes hostile, right? So that's the last piece that you want to account for in your trust. So I hope you guys took some notes. Again, this is what we personally use. This is what I use in my trust. I've helped a few of my clients establish this as well, but you can take those provisions to anyone who's helping you, and you guys can really create a solid shield around your Bitcoin that protects it, again, from external threats, internal threats, technical threats, and non-technical threats. Now, if there's somebody who you love, like, or trust, and they have Bitcoin or are thinking about holding Bitcoin, they likely have the same blind spot that most Bitcoiners have. So I encourage you to share this video with someone who you think they could benefit. And I'll see you guys on the next one.